Whenever we choose to not make a decision, that is a decision to change nothing about our situation. If you haven't seen this face before, my name is Chris. I've grown my own online coaching businesses to 7 figures, selling to some of the brokest people on earth, broke musicians. So if I can be successful selling to them, you can be successful in your industry as well. I hope this video just gives someone a different way to think about the decisions that they make. Sometimes we're scared to make a decision or make a choice, but that in itself is a choice, but we don't really think about that. Sometimes it's a choice to stay stagnant and see zero growth, and that hurts us more than taking the risk to do something at times. I was not bred to be in this situation. I wasn't bred to make money or be successful. I came from a family that escaped Vietnam during the war. My parents came to this country without any money and not a lick of English, so it was really difficult for them to do anything, even just order food or just any normal day-to-day things that we're grateful to be able to do now. Growing up in high school, I was always the person that got 0.0 GPA, and I dropped out of school and didn't graduate on time. That was me, so I was never lined up to be successful. I was always a musician myself, so I know what it was like to be that starving artist. Funny story, back when I was a sophomore in high school, I actually got arrested and got a felony for stealing a bunch of band equipment from my school. I remember me and my friend walked into this auditorium for whatever reason, looked at each other, looked at the stage, and we saw that there was this complete setup. The school band was setting up for some event. They were gonna play whatever it was. We saw the whole thing, and we were like, well, our band could use that. So we looked at each other, looked at the stage, both ran down and started just packing everything up, taking it and just bringing it to my girlfriend's apartment. I say that because I was always a person who did everything for music. Music was my life. I would do anything for it, including get arrested. Fast forward a couple years, I was supposed to graduate with my class, but I didn't do it because I didn't have enough credits. I dropped out. My dad passed away when I was a junior in high school. I dropped out, super depressed, not in a good place. Then it was just constant drinking, drugs, degeneracy, and just getting in trouble. I just was not in a position where I was lined up to have a life like I do now. So from experience, I can tell you that I've always been a person that didn't really make good decisions. I was always getting in trouble, going against everything. So I didn't really want to go to college. I thought that was the only path because that's what they told us. But I never felt like it was for me. I couldn't even do high school. How was I going to pay for school and then attend now? I was working at Subway for way too long, making sandwiches for like 6 or 7 years. And then I finally decided to upgrade a little bit, get a different job in a pharmacy. And I kind of kept moving my way up. But no matter what, I always felt like I was just stuck and at the mercy of somebody else. I ended up working at a hospital that was a very good paying job, and I could have probably been there for the rest of my life, but the thought of being there until I was 65 and too old to even enjoy my life, finally be able to retire and live really scarcely off of my retirement, because by then inflation would have wrecked us so hard that we'd be barely scraping by. That thought just killed me on the inside. I am a person who constantly likes to self-invoke chaos in their life. So when everything is just going normal, everything is comfortable, I tend to self-destruct a little bit. So being in a 9-to-5 was my worst nightmare. That brings me back to making decisions. I made a lot of decisions that were very risky, is what people would call it, because I was never afraid of having a bad outcome. I already made bad decisions. I already had bad outcomes in my life. It wasn't something I was afraid of, it was something that I was used to. You could see this as a bad thing, but I took more risks than most people are willing to take on, and reward usually comes from taking big risks. Some people that were smarter than me, read more books than me, might look at the choices that I made and do the opposite. But that kept them in a safe, comfortable, steady position. Sometimes smart people make the wrong decision because they have too much information and they're overeducated and they're just scared of the outcome. Think about when you were a kid and you crawled on a bike and you just pedaled away with no fear. That's because you didn't have the information that you knew you could fall, scrape your knee, hurt yourself, and it would hurt really bad. There was zero fear, lack of information, so we weren't afraid of taking the action and taking the risks. Sometimes knowing more hurts your ability. I know I have more baggage now since I've learned more because I know the outcome of some of the risks that go on. But at the same time, I've trained myself to be aware that if I don't take these actions, the consequence could be a lot worse. There was a pivotal moment for me between the time I quit my job and started entrepreneurship. I tried for like 10 years to figure out different ways to make a living by myself with my music. I would see a new opportunity like selling beats. I'd try that. Then as soon as times got hard, I'd look for another opportunity, start there, sync licensing. That was hard, find another opportunity, start there. It was this constant vicious cycle of getting just one step and then starting back at the finish line. And this is what happens when you don't have guidance. Any endeavor that you're going to go in is always going to have roadblocks and challenges. Most of us quit too soon before we can see any reward. So after 10 years of just that headache, I finally decided, well, maybe I should get some help. I always thought there was all the information on YouTube. We have the internet. Why would I hire anybody? That's a waste of money. But 10 years later, it kind of gets to you. So I decided to hire a coach. I saw that he was doing something called high ticket sales. He was showing you how to build a business around teaching your skills. By this point, I had been doing music for a long time, so I knew I was confident in being able to teach that. I dove deeper, looked at testimonials, looked at all these results, and I was like, man, I really want to do this. And so I had $1,000 in my bank account, like a big shot. And I was like, I'm ready to throw down 1K. Let's go. Let's make this money right now. I jumped on the phone with the salespeople and they said it was 15K. But if I decided to act now, it was 10K. So it was 10 to 15 times more expensive than I thought it was going to be and what I was willing to pay. I am so grateful that they put this pressure on me to make this decision, because if I didn't make this decision correctly, or if I made the opposite decision, I would not be sitting here speaking to you today. I would be at a 9 to 5 working my life away. So when they said this price, I wanted nothing more than to pretend like my phone died, get off the phone, and never talk to them again. That would have been the comfortable choice to do. I would have saved $10,000. But this decision was disguised as saving $10,000. What I really would have paid was a future fortune of millions and millions of dollars in the lifestyle that I wanted. There was two options. I could either pay 10K, that was the cost of one thing. The other decision, the cost, was to work a job I hated until I was 65 and I was too old and I had broken bones and couldn't enjoy my life anymore before I got a break. So which one cost more? I'm so grateful that I decided to take a $10,000 investment. I borrowed money, I took out a loan, I took out savings, I did everything that I could, and I invested 10K into that coaching program. And when you're that heavily vested, that uncomfortable, you do every single thing that person tells you to do. You ask no questions, you just do all the things they tell you to do, even if it's super uncomfortable. You end up working and pushing to a level where you didn't even realize was possible. So a broke geekazoid is going to look at that and be like, well, they just scammed you out of $10,000. You ended up paying $10,000. What they don't realize is they've been scammed their entire life, that college and working a job was the only way out. I paid $10,000 to free me for the rest of my life. That is the best deal ever. So flip this on its head. What if I decided to not make that decision? What if I decided to think about it? What if I decided to get off the phone? All I know is if I was to get off that phone, I would never come back and have that conversation. I would have never signed up and I would have never changed my life. And I mean that to the deepest of my core. There was no way. I was so scared. I was not going to get back on the phone and be like, oh, here's $15,000. I would have made it all the excuses in my head. Oh, dodged that bullet. Didn't have to pay 10K. And then I would have continued working this job and not even noticed that I made this mistake. The decision to lose a future fortune can be disguised as saving money today. This is a very complicated concept, but I hope this makes sense. Sometimes we're so zoomed in to what we have going on that we can't see the things that are right next to us. If you were looking down the scope of a rifle, you could see meters and meters and meters away. You could see something that's so small, that's so far away, right? But can you see the person that's standing right next to you? There could be an enemy right next to you or about to stab you in the neck and you would have no idea. And that's how close we look at things in our life, that we don't see opportunities that are right next to us. Another big decision I had to make, I grew to about 100,000 people on Instagram with an audience of music producers. This is what I've always identified as. This is who I helped. I couldn't help though, as I grew, that I felt like I was hitting the ceiling and I was super limited to a market that didn't see the value in investing in themselves and just getting better. Surrounding myself around people like that just felt like I was being constantly dragged down. You know, when you put crabs in a bucket, if one of the crabs tries to crawl out, the other crabs will pull them down to their level. And that's what it felt like for me. Even though I put in all this work and all this time and all this energy to build this audience, I just felt like it was a constraint for me. So I made the decision to change audiences and started going after people who are in business. Do you know what that did? That tanked my Instagram. If you look at my Instagram now, you'll probably think it's a fake profile because I spent all this time growing a different audience, switch gears, nobody relates to that message anymore. The algorithm doesn't like it, so I get 4 likes per video. But that's fine. Like, you can think it's a fake profile. I'm not offended. I get it. But that one decision doubled my business immediately. A lot of times we will look at the surface and what we see doesn't align with what we think, but never assume. Vanity metrics are meant to throw you off. I know people who have millions of followers who don't know how to make any money. I know people who have 200 followers who make a lot of money. I'm not saying that money is the only thing you should go after, but what is your goal? My goal was to make an income, a living off of the attention that I garnered. It wasn't just to garner attention. So if your goal is to garner attention and not make any money, different game plan. Again, I knew I was giving up all this hard work, this audience that I had worked so hard to build, but I knew I had to expand and grow outside of the music industry. And if I didn't make that decision, I would still have the ceiling looming over my head. I would feel like I'm not growing as a person. So sometimes the hard decision is the decision that we need to make. Most of the time, honestly. Even if we're sacrificing things, just make sure it's a sacrifice that you're okay with if the trade-off is what you want. Awesome, you're like, Chris, this is great and all, but like, how do I make these types of decisions? The first thing you have to think about is making logical versus emotional decisions. 1 + 1 = 2, no matter how long you sit and think about it. You could sit here, twiddle your thumbs, you could write it down on a piece of paper, you could ask your friend, you could ask your boss, it's still going to equal 2. No matter how bad you want it to equal 3, it's not going to equal 3, it still equals 2. So logic is logic is logic is logic. If things make sense, it's A, it's B, it's black, it's white, there's no opinions to it, those are what you should base your decisions off of. If you hired a coach, he costs $10K, you could make $100K, you could make $1 million. No matter how scared you are or how long you think about it, that is still the right decision to make, right? If I told you, hey, if you trade me $1, I'll give you a $100 bill, are you like, I need to think about it? No, it's the decision to make. This is the hard part to understand too. If you sit and think about a decision that's hard for you to make, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get more and more in your head, and it's going to convert more and more into an emotional decision. The longer you think, the more emotions come up. You're going to talk yourself out of all of the logic because emotion is the stronger driver in human beings. So the longer you sit and you think about making an investment or taking a risk, you're just going to talk yourself out of it most of the time. Look, if things align, the best thing for you to do is make the decision and run with it. Do you think that business owners who have to make a lot of tough decisions on a daily basis are sitting and thinking about it and letting themselves dwell in emotions? No. If it checks all the boxes, they have to make the decision. That's how you become a decision maker and a leader. The decisions that you've made in the past have all led up to this moment that you have right now and the outcome that you have today. If you don't have the outcome that you want, don't you think that you should change your path of making decisions? I hear all the time, well, I don't make any rash decisions. I like to sit and think about it and sleep on it, but they're on the phone with me hoping to change their life. They're like, I don't like the position I'm in today, but I'm going to continue taking the action I've been taking. How does that make sense logically? They'll say, I believe you can help me. I know all these people around you are making this money, but I want to sit and I want to think about it. And I want to sleep on it. I want to twiddle my thumbs a little bit. That is called making an emotional decision. You really think getting off the phone, you're going to want to convince yourself to spend more money? It's not going to happen. You're just going to sit, dwell in your emotions. Your emotions are going to take over. You're going to overshadow the logic, and you're going to make the wrong choice. And then you're going to make the decision to change nothing about your situation. So logic and emotion. Some people have made bad rational decisions in the past. They've made bad quick decisions. But if you think about it, the likelihood is that you made an emotional decision to the logic. What I mean by this, you didn't look at both sides of the coin. Every coin has two sides. There's heads and tails. Every piece of paper has two sides. It's not like if you turn it over, it just disappears. And so there's always two sides to things. To make a logical decision, you should look at both sides of it, the positive and the negative, without attaching your emotions and your feelings to it. Look at the positive, look at the negative, outweigh them, make the decision based on that. And when I say emotions to the logic, you could be talking yourself out of all the negative things. Oh, that's probably not going to happen. Likelihood's not going to happen. Super excited about this. If you were to buy a car, right? Oh, I can definitely pay that. If I stop doing all this, I can pay that. Because you're so excited to buy this car, even though it's a bad financial decision. So don't attach your emotions to justify the logic. Then you can make decisions quickly without wasting a bunch of time and making sure you make the right one. Another point, there's decision and there's choices. They sound like the same thing. Choices is the luxury to be able to choose from multiple options. Decisions is cutting off all options except for one. If you want to make the right decisions, you have to decide to cut off all other options that don't make sense. Choose one, even if it's hard. You have to continue on the path and sticking with that decision. No matter how hard it gets, no matter how many times you fail and fall on your face, you're gonna get up and you're gonna continue to do the thing because there's no other choice. I personally have succeeded. A lot of my students that I see succeed, a common pattern is that they quit their job. I'm not saying quit your job, but I'm just saying the people that have quit their jobs and went all in, they were always the ones that saw the success because they cut off every other choice, every other option that they had. They burnt their boats and they made this one decision work. Necessity is the biggest motivator. When you have no other choice, you do everything you can to make the one option work. This is an important skill. Everything is a decision. So you can make the decision to do it, to not do it, to charge more for your prices, to charge less for your prices, to help more people, to help less people. If you are an expert or a coach or you teach anything, you have a skill that you can help people with. I'm going to show you how to build a high ticket offer and how to do marketing so that you can attract the people that want to buy it and how to sell. So if you want access to that training, I'll leave the link below in the description. I hope this was helpful. Hit subscribe if it was. Share this with a friend and I'll see you in the next video.